Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
If you network, if you're out there networking, you're trying to get people to do things for you. You're certainly doing things for them, but you're trying to get them to do things for you, and it doesn't always just happen in the moment. Sometimes things happen down the line. Sometimes it might be a week, a day, a week, it might be a month. I've had things come back to me, it's been years later. And for that to happen, you need to make an impression. You need to make an impression that they're going to remember. Now, I ran across this study, and it was done at Stanford Graduate Business School. What they found was that a story is 22 times more memorable than facts alone. What they did was this researcher, Jennifer Aker, I believe her name is, Aaker, had students give 1-minute pitches, and 9 out of 10 of the presentations were heavily supported by just facts and figures, just up there, just want, facts and figures. But the 10th presentation was told, had sort of a human story to it to support the position. And what she found is that 5% of the audience could recall the statistics, but 63% of them remembered the stories. Stories are powerful. Now, I've shared that with you, and you're like, okay, yeah. But there's a skill to telling stories. And so today I have on the program with me Lee Schneider. He's a producer, a futurist, a novelist. He teaches a master class called Storyline Sessions. It covers how to develop storytelling skills that win business, communicate your ideas, and get projects funded, get referrals. He's taught a media making and storytelling class at the University of Southern California School of Architecture for over 10 years. I would imagine architecture can be one of those things where it gets wonky into a lot of the facts and figures and numbers and jargon. He's also the founder of Red Cup Agency, which is an award-winning podcast production company. Previously a writer and producer for major networks, he now focuses on sharing practical storytelling frameworks for business leaders. And as I indicated before, in his spare time, he writes novels, fiction, science fiction, and fantasy novels. Lee, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me.
All right. Let's quickly touch on the novels. How many novels have you got? What inspired it?
Well, do you want to know how many novels are in the drawer or how many I actually published? I'm kidding.
Well, yeah, but I know there are probably lots. I just finished my third, and I figured, okay, that may last. And as I'm writing, I came up with ideas for 3 more.
Yes.
And I told my wife, I said, I know I'm going to go to my grave with things undone. I just know. I don't want to go this soon, but at some point, it's just, as the island of knowledge grows, so does the shoreline of curiosity. Sort of a philosophy. So anyhow, yeah.
Yeah, I've published 3, a science fiction trilogy.
Oh, awesome.
Called The Utopia Engine. It takes place in the near future, and it's about people coping with AI and climate change, and it leaps ahead to 2050 or so and takes a guess at what's going to happen then. In New York, it takes place in New York and California, kind of bounces back and forth.
Okay.
And I've started a new one, a new trilogy, which is a fantasy series, more for younger audiences, for younger readers. And I love doing it. I made the half joke about in the drawer because I was recalling, as you were telling that storytelling story, that I went to visit I used to live in New York and I used to write plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I visited a famous playwright named Percy Granger at his Upper West Side apartment. And there was a whole wall of manuscripts and papers. If you can picture like the wall behind you, twice that big, very big, and filled with papers and manuscripts and books. And I said, Percy, what's that? He says, oh, that's all the stuff that I'm working on but haven't finished.
Wow.
And it was, wow, this guy's written, he wrote Eminent Domain. He wrote some pretty important plays that were important a few decades ago. But I think of the kind of ratio to actual get it out there versus stuff that lives in your head or in the drawer for a while. It's a pretty big ratio.
Yeah. Well, it's not everything's going to land, and I don't know. It's just for
Yeah.
me, for me, I don't want to call it a healthy obsession, but it gives my mind something to work on.
Hmm.
And it's truly a mental exercise you can appreciate. It's a mental exercise for our listeners. It's a mental exercise in trying to tie things together because you have all these loose tentacles
Hmm.
that you're building in the beginning, and you have to kind of tie them all together in the end, or try to. I think that's what makes a good story.
Yep.
I hate
Sure.
reading a story. It's like, okay, who did it? Where did he show
Yeah.
up? Right.
Right.
So anyhow, um,
Right.
well, great storytelling. Let's talk about storytelling and what makes a great story and what makes well, I guess the test of a great story is one that's remembered. Three
Hmm.
Little Pigs, and it's a story we remember. Red Riding Hood, those are stories we remember.
Right.
Um, but I think, like most things, there is, to a degree, a formula there.
Absolutely. There always is. And, people think in a business setting that you always have to tell a story about yourself, but
Hmm.
that's not necessarily going to win the day. What people need to hear in a story is usually a very simple concept of a setup and a payoff. They need to take a journey in the story, even if it's a very short journey. They
Hmm.
need to know that you're going to make a promise at the beginning of the story, like somebody was murdered, if that's your who
Yeah,
done it. And at the end, you're definitely going to find out who done it. And if you don't, it's a frustrating story. And every story uses that. If you think of the silliest Netflix rom-com, the couple meet in the beginning,
right.
maybe they hate each other, there's friction, but by the end, it's going to be okay. They're getting married or they're together. That's a little story arc. And I like to teach this idea of a story arc. You can't have a flat line
Right.
where if the worst sin is you get up to make a presentation and you kind of mumble your way through it. Well, that's kind of what a flat line story is. It has no setup and payoff. We want to end up more knowledgeable. We want to end up at a higher level than when we started.
Yeah.
So that is the power of storytelling in business, and it can take the narrative form can take so many different forms. It's not necessarily once upon a time or there was a little girl in the woods and there was a wolf. It can also be the story that your website tells, the story that your video tells, or even we're doing a podcast right now. There's a certain framework to this podcast. You've learned, as has every other successful podcaster, that there's an audience expectation of a shape of this thing. There's a setup and a payoff. You told a story in the beginning. You gave a little bit of research, which I've read that study. And the storytelling helps us make sense of the world and it helps us connect with each other. I
Yeah.
mean, we could go on and on about that, but it's a very powerful tool that I think a lot of people neglect or at least don't use to its full potential.
What I will in my business and AmSpirit Business Connections, we're these are referral based networking groups. People will give 30-second, 60-second commercials, and I tell people, give me a 30-second story, give me a 60-second story, which can be more difficult. You give somebody 500
Absolutely.
pages, it's like you can flesh out everything, but
Right.
to think through, and it's a challenge for people. But I tell them, just think about somebody you've served, and condense it down into a story. Um, and if you need, you can use AI or Chat GPT to say, okay, here's a 300 word story, and take it down to 75 words, right? And that's
Sure.
that gets you to
Sure.
about half a minute. And it can be
That
done.
will that will definitely work. I gave a keynote address in Detroit to architects a couple of months ago, and a guy came up afterward and said, he's an architect. He said,
Yeah.
I'm also a stand-up comic, and I teach stand-up comedy. And here's one of the things that I have the students do, have them write out the whole bit, whatever the joke is, and then look at that and cross out anything that doesn't lead to the punchline. It's kind of a setup and payoff notion.
Right.
And he says a lot of students end up with a lot of crossouts and realize there's a lot of filler in there.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of this has to do with, well, what is the filler in the story? What do you really need to impart? What's the point of the story? And I think when you're talking about referrals, say, a lot of that comes down to not only what you have to offer, but what is the other person going to get out of it?
Right.
You know, when I tell people to tell a business story, the first thing they may think of is, well, I'm going to tell a story about basically how smart I am, how good my company is,
Right.
but if that doesn't serve what the client needs to hear, well, it's not serving the purpose. You really need to put yourself in the client's shoes and think about what's their gap. Someone who wrote a very smart book about storytelling for business talks about a story gap. The client comes in missing something in their lives, in their business. If you can address that gap, you're going to tell a winning story.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love the notion of crossing out, and having that,
Yeah.
what you call filler. It's almost, um, gratuitous, I guess. I don't know. Like I go to a movie and they'll have these long drawn out sex scenes or romance scenes. It's like, okay, I get it. They like each other, right? We don't need all this, we don't need all this, but it's serving, so I just need to put this in. People just feel this need. And that's just one example. People feel that need even doing a 30-second or 60-second story of,
Sure.
I really don't do a lot of this. Okay, that's not necessary. Just tell the story.
Yes.
Um, just tell it. People don't. You're an expert. Just be the expert.
Right.
They don't need the backstory to the story. Just I came up with this idea. It's like, no, just tell the story.
Yeah. Well, another important form of storytelling in business is the origin story. If you're a startup founder or you have a new business, you're
Sure.
called upon to tell a 1 or 2 minute origin story that really lands with people. And the example I love is the Nike, speaking of sports, the Nike origin story, where
Yeah.
they literally made the first Nikes in a garage using a waffle iron to make the soles, melting urethane. The waffle iron was a wedding present. And then Phil Knight went out on the road with a real mission, a real sense of why, a real sense of purpose, which was, the shoes that your athletes are using, he would tell the coaches, they're not helping them. They don't have enough traction. They're not the right shoes. And he would take out a handmade Nike shoe that they literally a prototype and say, this is what your folks ought to be wearing. They'll race faster. They'll do better. And Phil Knight had tried being an encyclopedia salesman and he hated it. And he tried being a financial advisor guy and didn't love that. But he had a real passion about running. He really thought that if more people ran, we'd be healthier and the world would be a better place. So armed with that why in his heart, he could sell the heck out of those sneakers and he showed up and
Yeah.
really filled a need. He could speak directly to the client need. And to cap this, it's a great story arc, because it's a company that starts in a garage and ends up being a global company. Like,
No, it's a giant. I believe he ran track at the University of Oregon. I think that's
that's
so.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. He
He's a
wasn't just.
runner. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So people really need to hear, if you're going to tell a story, think about what really matters to you. Like, why are you here? Why, if you're networking or trying to get referrals or something, well, what's your purpose? If everyone says, well, I'm just here to make money, well, great, but that's not really going
Yeah.
to win what you need to win from your prospect. You need to think, well, what do they need? Or how can I serve them? Or what's the connection between us? that
Yeah.
is going to really draw us together in a way that's a bit deeper than, client service, whatever that might be.
What's your thoughts on taking people through a range of emotions or humor? Um, to me, it seems like there's got to be a lot of dimensions to a story. Imagine a black and white picture versus a
Yeah.
color picture. It's just we're just we just remember details and things much better. And
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Well, you need a framework usually. If it's an origin story of your company, okay, what problem are you solving? How qualified are you to be this person? There was a master class, apologies for the helicopter flying over. There was a master class I taught recently with medically oriented startup founders, and one of the people there was a pharmacist. She worked literally in the pharmacy department to starting up a pharmacy app that helped pharmacies trade prescriptions if they had a surplus. Well, she knew what she was talking about. I mean, that story filled a need. It served the pharmacies, and she was the person to do it. So I think that when you talk about the colors of it, yes, but again, it comes back to you have to hit a few key points. Why are you the person to tell the story? Why are you the person to win the business?
mhm,
Why should they listen to me? All of that sort of thing. And why do you really care about it? Is there something that you can add to it? Like the world would be a better place if we were all healthier and runners.
right,
No one's going to say no to that.
right. Well, yeah, it becomes compelling, and I would imagine in certain circumstances, humor can be memorable, and other times where it's off-putting, it just doesn't work, just doesn't fit.
Yeah. Here's the thing with humor, you have to try it out. Humor can be dangerous because what one person thinks is funny might not. So
Yeah,
if you're giving a presentation or giving a talk, I always say, first of all, read that thing out loud, record yourself talking it, and please give it to another person. Corral your spouse, a friend, a colleague, someone from the conference room. Talk it out to them and watch them. Watch what they're doing. Do they
yeah,
laugh at the right parts? Do they start looking away? Do they start coughing? What are the
yeah,
things that suggest that they're not tuned in? And try to read the room because you have to try it out. It has to be road tested. You can't be in a closet, create a brilliant talk or presentation, and then just burst out and say, "Here I am." It's never going to work very
yeah.
well.
No, it doesn't. Um, just a quick story within a podcast episode about story. Uh, I I have a law degree. I was in law school and took a class on business plans, and
Mhm.
I'd like to write little funny little anecdotes as part of the business plan. And the professor said, generally, humor doesn't work. Okay, noted.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't always work. Let's touch on you talk about testing. Um, thoughts on practice and just being prepared. And I was on a podcast. I was talking to a gentleman who also does podcasting, and gets on podcasts. And he said, a lot of me getting on podcasts is my way to just get reps, just to practice
Mhm.
telling my story.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sure I've done that. I didn't think about it that way, though. You
Sure.
know,
Well, that's pretty brilliant and true. It's a wonderful way. Book yourself on podcasts as a guest. It's a great place to practice. It's a great place to just try out your log line or try out your pitch
right?
and see how people react. And again, since we're usually it can see each other, see how the other person's reacting.
Yeah,
It also can be weird, but helpful to watch yourself on video because we all have habits that some of which of those habits are terrific and some of those habits are not terrific.
yeah,
If you're giving a presentation, if you have a habit of kind of backing away from the audience, like a client of my wife's had, That's saying I want to get out of here. You want to communicate the kind of lean in experience and the connection experience. Uh, but for me, practice, I can tell you my greatest fear in giving presentations, and it relates to practice, memorization, knowing the talk or the presentation enough. So I really don't need to look at notes all that often.
Yeah.
And my belief is people really need you to connect with the camera or the person in the beginning. Say if you have slides, the first two or three slides, then people don't mind if you need to look at a note, it's okay, as
Yeah.
long as you don't get lost. And then at the end, you have to deliver the end. It's a setup and payoff. If you have a great funny line, or, if I want you to remember one thing today, you really need to be able to deliver that by looking into the camera or the audience without a flaw.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't think it's a question of rote memorization of the whole thing, but if you've given a talk two or three times, you start to memorize it anyway. I mean, I teach a 15-part course for USC, University of Southern California. Each lecture discussion is at least an hour and a half, almost 2 hours sometimes. So I'm talking for close to 2 hours times 15. And I've done that for 10 years. Do I need notes? I bring my notes, but
Yeah.
by that time, I may drop a line, I may replace a word, but the other thing that I often tell people is no one's going to know if you drop a word. Only you know that.
Yeah.
They're not sitting there with the script. No one's going to know if you said this sentence a minute later than the script said or you intended to. It usually finds its way in there. It's more what people are connecting with is authenticity, you looking at them and telling enough of a storyline, a story arc, not necessarily a story locked in, but giving them a setup and a payoff, giving them a bold statement. This is also very useful, a bold statement at the beginning that you can deliver on.
Yeah. That- I what I sense is when you're saying memorization, it's not word for word memorization. It's memorization of the general flow of
Yeah,
things.
sure. I mean, I will write out scripts for things that I'm doing,
Yeah.
but then I break them down into either bullet points or note cards because if it's kind of a trap. If you get into like glancing at your script a million
Yeah.
times, you'll never get out of that. So to memorize the bold points in the order that you need to memorize them in, uh, even on a teleprompter. I mean, I've tried playing around with teleprompters and I find it hard to make contact with people when I'm doing the teleprompter.
Yeah.
So it's almost better for me to do this, memorize the bold points, know where you are in the architecture of the big picture.
Yeah. I mean, you see that in podcasting. I'll use somebody as an example. Megan Kelly. Megan Kelly was an ABC on Fox and
Hmm.
a pro with the teleprompter. And I think she has a very popular podcast now. And she still has the teleprompter, but it's all also very authentic. It's also, oh, she'll drop an F bomb, right? I mean, she'll speak from
Yeah,
the heart. But it's kind of this perfect blend of,
yeah. Well,
and it,
yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, I used to work in broadcast news. I worked for ABC, NBC, a little bit for CBS, a while for Dateline NBC. And I watched a lot of really skilled people work with memorization, teleprompters. There was a guy, local California news here named Jerry Dunphy, who you could hand him something uh, 2 minutes before we went on air and it went up on the teleprompter, and boy, it looked like he had just lived those words.
yeah,
Or you
that's
could ask him
amazing.
to it is beautiful, or you
Yeah,
could ask him, Jerry, that needs to be 4 seconds shorter. You go, okay. And he would speak it 4 seconds shorter.
it's
On the
that's
other side of this, I mean, how
yeah, it's a
beautiful is that,
craft.
right?
Yeah, that's a
It's a
craft.
craft.
Yeah,
I worked for a while with Ron Reagan Jr., the son of the
sure.
president, and he has a photographic memory. So he would write something down and then just look at it and say, okay, let's go and record it. And he was like a one take guy because he could remember every word just by looking at it once.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears here as we kind of wrap up. You had mentioned earlier, a great way to practice is to get on other people's podcasts.
Hmm.
I think an even better way of practicing is to have your own podcast.
Yes.
And that's kind of the lead into Red Cup Agency. I believe that's a lot of what you guys do.
Yeah,
I tell people that all the time. Like, hey, connect me to people who have podcasts. I said, you know what? Do what I can, but you ought to maybe have your own podcast, because then you get to tell stories all the time and
that's
develop
right.
content. Not everybody likes that, but anyhow, talk to us about Red Cup Agency and
Sure.
types of
Well,
people you're looking for. So
I've done podcasts for big companies like Nike and Glow.com and Glassdoor, and I've done podcasts for individuals. I've done multi-season podcasts. I've done interview-driven podcasts or just talking podcasts. The one thing I can tell you about it now is it's gotten ridiculously easy from a technical standpoint to do a podcast. You
yeah,
can use Zoom, you can use other platforms like Riverside. They're easy to make, easy to post. The microphones are getting so good. The software is getting so good that if there was a dog barking, we could take that dog out
yeah.
and just have the voices.
Well,
The
you had mentioned
lights
the
are cheap.
helicopter. I didn't hear it at all. I
Well,
didn't.
I have a good mic
Yeah,
and Zoom has voice canceling. So a
yeah,
lot of the issues that were a struggle, like, oh my gosh, how are we going to deal with that, are not issues anymore. And you can choose to do the video aspect of it if you want. Often we do it like this where we can see each other, but you don't have to. If you're more comfortable just speaking, well, speak. I mean,
yeah,
it's yeah. And by the way, many people are really comfortable with the idea of just talking to each other. They don't mind that I record video, and I will use video in Instagram promos and for YouTube shorts. You can spin off other content, but people love just talking, and it's a very comfortable way for people to connect. And you can even, you mentioned chatbots. You could use a chatbot like ChatGPT or Claude or the bot of your choice and say, here's my bio, here's my expertise. What should my podcast be about? What kind of people should I ask on it? What should the title of the podcast be?
yeah,
And give me some ideas for episodes and write the first script, which are
yeah,
things that I've done. And you'll get all of that. It won't be perfect. It'll be like a smart intern doing the work for you, but it's great to bounce off. It's great to start. It's like having a partner to bounce ideas off of, and it works very well.
yeah. Generally, I don't have a problem, but there are situations where I'm got a guest coming on, and I need that kind of that intro story, that intro
Hmm.
information. I just happened to have the storytelling study. I was working on another project, another presentation in my organization. But I will just, okay, here's the person, here's their bio. What would be a great lead in? Something,
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, something historical. Give me something historical. Give me something contemporary. Give me a metaphor. Give me a fable. I don't ask for all those things, but just depending upon who the guest is. So, Lee, I really appreciate the time. Best way to get a hold of you through redcupagency.com. Can people
Correct.
contact you through that? Okay.
Sure. Red Cup Agency, like a red cup. There's
Yep.
a story behind it.
Okay.
Redcupagency.com.
Well, I'll get that in the show notes. I do appreciate your time. I learned something. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.